Hello and welcome to the Toronto International Film Festival. My name is Andrea Picard and I'm the lead curator of the Wavelength section, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you to the Q&A recording for Saint Anne by Rhayne Vermette, which is screening as part of Wavelengths. And we're so happy to have Rhayne here with us. We're also exceedingly pleased and honored to be presenting the film this year. So welcome, Rhayne, and thank you for your time.
Yeah, thanks. I'm happy to get to talk about my movie for sure.
And this is also a nice follow-up because we have presented your shorts before as part of the year-round Wavelengths program at the Cinematheque. And I was at that program and I remember you, as you presented, I think it was about 8 shorts, a number of shorts. Yeah. And your final one, Thomas, you had said it felt very much like a closure, sort of the end of a chapter. And that you were preparing a long project, a new project that you were researching. And I'm just wondering what the impetus was to move into long form.
I think, yeah, with that film Domus, I felt like I had reached perfection in a way. And it was just time to shift gears. I was really at the time too questioning a lot of things such as community, collaboration, who my community was, who I could collaborate with. So it came out of like that impetus of like wanting to explore these things, wanting to broaden the scope of things, and yeah, pull on these threads that are prevalent in everything I do, but kind of express it in a totally new way and kind of take my quest for the impossible somewhere else. Yeah.
Right, I love that. So Saint Anne is an experimental narrative. We do feel some of your structural style there, but it's also an evolution of your work in some ways. I'm wondering if you can talk about your approach to this film, both formally and with its storytelling.
Yeah, my approach is very chaotic. I don't think there was like a direct approach. I definitely went in there with a specific script, a specific idea, because I did work with Lindsay McIntyre and Aaron Weisgerber. Like we kind of brought them in, and they were behind the camera. But my final budget at the end of everything would not allow for that, and so the project really came about my peers here in Manitoba, and so that really rejigged everything and changed everything. So it's just this kind of collaborative spirit, and it was done very improvisationally. Like I really like to think about music and how it kind of comes from somewhere else, and I'm really averse to these sort of boxed in approaches to filmmaking. And so it was this kind of call and response with the images and what was coming in and playing to everybody's strengths, because a lot of us sort of stepped into this project and had no idea what the hell we were doing or how to do it, but we just we're really kind of developing this way of exploring a story that is kind of truly true to who we are here in Manitoba. So yeah, it was very chaotic, and I definitely have to collaborate with people who are very open-minded, open for exploration. It would not work with people who they need to know what they're doing. So yeah, big kudos to those who kind of came on board and were like, yeah, they kind of dove into the deep dark abyss with me and trusted me, which is important. Yeah.
And you obviously spent a lot of time together. I mean, I know that you shot for almost 2 years. You see several seasons go by. But let's discuss the landscape for a little bit. It's also a story of a woman who comes back to her daughter, but it also feels like a love letter to rural Manitoba in some ways. The landscape is very much a character and alive in this film.
Yeah, it's I think we live in this time of land acknowledgements, and to me, when I think about Saint Anne, it is this kind of weird audiovisual kind of acknowledgement of spaces of my childhood, spaces of my dreams, spaces of memories, and it really is a character. And a lot of those kind of landscape scenes too kind of came out of my relationship with my dad, who like helped me the whole time. Like we would go location scouting together, and so a lot of the scenes just came from the back of his truck, and kind of yeah, it's heartwarming to think of those days where we were just like, let's go check something out and see, bring the camera and see what happens.
And so how did you cast for this film? Is this a combination of actors, non-actors? You did mention a lot of improvisation.
Yeah, even the casting changed based on like who kind of came because my friend Savannah had never casted a film. She was helping me, so it was just kind of people came in the right way, and a lot of my family on my my Vermette cousin,
Mhm.
uncle came in, and my dad's in it, and so roles were rejigged to kind of open the door for them to come in, and yeah, no, not it's just yeah, and often, our auditions were kind of just feeling out the people and not so much about the role that was kind of, presented to me. Like,
Mhm.
Isabel, who plays Athene in the film and who's just so lovely, but uh, a large reason why we selected her is because Chantal, her mom, is just this phenomenal being and just so, down for whatever, super chill. And so, and yeah, Dolores Gosselin, who plays the mayor, like I went and had lunch with her, and that's how we made those agreements. They were kind of really not these, impersonal auditions. It's really about those relationships and how they grew over 2 years or so. Yeah.
Mhm. It was also such a pleasure to hear this Manitoban French, which I don't hear very often or see in films. I mean, we hear the Quebecois inflections. I have a relationship with Francophone Ontario as well, which seemed a bit similar. But there's a very particular distincting quality to the language and the sound of the film, and it just added another texture to the film. I don't know if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, it was amazing, and especially if you kind of really listen, Manitoba French, there's not one. It's all very nuanced. Like my father's French is vastly different from my mother's French, and I was meeting people in the community, and they would know that I was from Notre Dame de Lourdes just based on my accent, which is kind of really lovely. And so it was, this whole project was about me kind of getting in touch, with that relationship to Saint Anne, with my family, the Vermettes, and also the French language, which is, something since I've moved to Winnipeg, I've been distanced from it. I stumble a lot, so it was really nice to be on set working in French, and it was interesting to see how writing in French change the story and bring that intersectionality which I occupy, French, English, rural, city. So I'm really kind of in that kind of sweet spot, I think. That's murky sweet spot. Yeah.
And how about being in the film yourself? I mean, you've held down so many roles between writing, directing, collaborating with the cinematographers, producing. I mean, how did you manage all this?
It was insanity, but it was just there was no other way that I could knew how to do it. And me coming on board, there was somebody else who I thought, but they were leaving, and I had no budget. So I was like, well, I don't have to pay an actor if I do it. And I'm interested in acting and stuff. So, but yeah, it was chaotic. I touched everything, and but was very nicely supported by my family and crew. But I was for sure like, every single component of this film came from me, and it was just is insanity. But
You're great. You're great in it.
yeah, it was utter insanity. But
I mean, it feels like a very personal project, obviously, and you're talking about, your relation to your family and language and the land. But there's also a pull towards abstraction, which is also you and indicative of your style. And there feels like this tension. There's kind of these more documentary moments in the way that you film bodies in fragments. Women singing together. The camera's kind of close and roves over their bodies. But then, of course, there's the sort of collage work that you do with images and textures and how light falls, which I think, there's this beautiful tension between the liminality between the physical world and the metaphysical world.
yeah, I think that's just, that comes from the camera is, kind of central to everything I do. And I really do chase images, and I'm really drawn to kind of things I see in dreams or, that come to me. And that's why I make the work I make. And uh, yeah, there's something sensual about it. And it kind of really motivated the project, like I would go in with certain ideas, but once the images come back, they have their own ideas, and it's fun kind of chasing those ideas. And for me too, the camera is this kind of it's magic. It is kind of this device that I can use to experience something beyond this 3D. I'm not so much interested in this 3D at all, and so it's kind of this nice gateway for me to enter. And even the camera became a very collaborative kind of communal space. There was, 5 of us operating that camera. It wasn't this like one dictatorship, one person, one set of eyes. And I think, yeah, that kind of speaks to the sort of matriarchal kind of umbrella, which really kind of took care of this project.
Yeah, I think there was no question that you were going to shoot this on film, right? With your relationship to materiality, and it's so singular in this film as well. And particularly, I feel like the landscapes, you feel just how alive they are with the light that changes very subtly. So it's sort of like this natural play between humans existing in a landscape and being enveloped by that very space. And I want to talk about space a little bit, because I know you have an architecture background and that you studied architecture and that led you to film. And I'm wondering how much that informs the way you look at spaces and also construct or deconstruct spaces.
Yeah, I think for me, it's all about this idea of deconstructing the space and kind of not caring too much on what's outside of the frame. And it was really enjoyable to kind of exist in these sort of sets and kind of have an art director, Jen Antuga, to kind of like adorn these fantastic spaces. But one of my favorite spaces is the tabletop, and it's prevalent in like every single film. It's always about what happens at the table, and this is still like this very reoccurring everything happens at the table in St. Anne. And so it's kind of this nice way to kind of help me guide, because I always I'm interested in not one film. I'm interested in my discipline and my creative world, so I'm always thinking about the progress and the continuation. And so everything is always taking what the last film and pushing it further and kind of breathing into that space. And what is that space of that creative world? Like St. Anne, I wasn't tethered to, we were sort of loosely tethered to a time period, but even then I don't really give a shit about that kind of stuff. And it was just kind of whatever happens. And I would find spaces like that, that green shed. And so I just wrote scenes so we could have it, because it's such a, a delicious place, weird and bizarre. And yeah.
I mean, it definitely feels timeless, right? It could be of different epochs, and that's part of the textures also, I think. So how much comes together in editing? Like, how much would you have shot, and how much of that deconstruction / construction comes together during the editing process?
It all happens in editing. I don't get tied too much to what things mean or where they're going to go on set. I kind of have a strong innate sense that I can put it all together. And so I'm always thinking about, the sample, audiovisual, and a narrative can kind of come out of that. I'm not tethered to sync sound. I like to kind of break sound from image, which really kind of opens, the impossible is possible in the edit. But I am very still, I do, kind of watch those images, those sounds, and I use those as sort of the guide track. So it ended up vastly different than what I thought it would end up being once I was in editing and dealing with the realities of the footage. Yeah.
And did you work linearly or no? I assume not.
Yeah, no, not so much. Like I kind of would pick it up and drop it, and I didn't edit. The idea was I would always edit as we were going, but I was really terrified that my acting ruined my film, so I really pushed that off, and kind of took a while to climb that mountain for sure. Yeah.
The sound design is so rich, and just rewatching the film and it opening in black with, the sounds of insects and those natural sounds that we hear in the countryside. But there's more than that. There's either a music or a noise sound that's sort of foreboding. So it's obviously very layered and rich. And you already spoke about the sort of disjunction between sound and image and how important that is to you. But this soundtrack is really incredible, I feel. And maybe you could say more about that.
Yeah, it's awesome. I for sure pushed the sound team really hard, and want to acknowledge them, but I'm always thinking about sound. Like I'm obsessed with music. That is the one passion in my life. And always listening to music and always thinking about how that pushes me into other realms, you know, in ways that film has never been able to. So that's always really driving things. I'm also always thinking about what happens beyond the frame, and that was also kind of like a budget thing. You know, it was like when we were setting up shots, it's like, well, I can have this outside of the frame and signal to whatever I need, and you know, that kind of becomes that structure onto which to start building and kind of forming, you know, that story. And I also got to work with Brett Toronto, who I've collaborated a lot, who's like this amazing artist out here in Manitoba. And he just sent me a bunch of loops. Like I was like, I'm thinking about trains, I'm thinking about fire. And he often works with field recordings. So he sent me these really rough loops, and those really helped to kind of set the tone of the film, set the pace of the film. I leaned on them heavily to kind of help me kind of make that bridge from something like Domus, which was so animated and so myself, into, you know, when I first got the rushes of our first shoot, I had like a weird identity crisis because I was like, this is not my film. I don't recognize myself in this. And it really was what Brett brought to the table, which kind of, I kind of saw myself in, you know, the reflections of what he was doing and how I can use what he was doing to kind of, yeah, see myself once again and what I was doing. Yeah.
And since the film was such a long process, you know, you researched it and then you shot it, and then of course now we have this pandemic where it's, you know, being rolled out very slowly, but it is finding its audience. Has it changed for you? You've been able to sit with it for a moment. So you've been living with this film for a long time, and I know sometimes filmmakers say that when they, you know, when they first present the film to the audience, they're still kind of learning about it, or, you know, they're not ready to fully talk about it because they need some gestation period. But you've had a long time to be with this film. Has it changed for you? Have you discovered something new about it?
Yeah, I think I always am, you know, it's always, yeah, I figured out like this morning I had an epiphany about a film I made 7 years ago. And I was like, wow, like you know, and that's I think why I love making films. It really, I understand myself better. So it's always shifting and changing. I'm very like, I love that film, but I'm also very tired of it, and I'm very much into the next thing at this point too. So I think to me, what it changed, it kind of helped me finesse this way of working, which is not the way that we're used to working. It's like I'm more interested in sort of the documentary of a fiction and how we come together for fiction. So it's given me kind of courage and, you know, what I need to keep going along this weird path, even though people think it's, you know, impossible. It's like, you know, you know, it's finessing my interests and finessing my procedures and my process, and also finessing my collaborators. And so I am incredibly grateful for the experience of having made this film. My life is, you know, I'm overloading with wealth and friends and knowledge and all this kind of stuff and joy because of that one experience, you know. So yeah, it's I don't know.
I think this is a film that we can go back to several times too. I mean, in rewatching it a number of times, there's so much more that I want to see in the gaps. You know, there's mystery, and then there's a bit of supernatural. You feel this mystical pull, and I think there are various ways to read it. And then also, you know, the notions of family, belonging, freedom. There's a lot of kind of dialectical things happening in the film. I think that there's a great generosity in what you give the audience and allowing them to sort of put the pieces together as well. So I hope that that's something that you continue to use in your filmmaking. I want to ask one question about the Cousin Collective and how you got involved with them. They're fantastic.
They're the best. They actually are the best. Yeah, I don't know. I just this project, you know, I was successful in like arts councils sort of grants, which, you know, I'm very grateful for. And I had tried numerous times to like knock on the door of the industry because I knew that there was something of importance in what was happening and what I was proposing to do, but it was sort of, you know, it was not very successful for me. And, you know, it's just sometimes it's harder to kind of explain the unexplainable and rather just go do it yourself. And then so at the very tail end of like the process, yeah, I just saw like the open call for projects, and to me it was like, yes, finally, you know, this collective exists, that they're allowing the space that I kind of want to exist in, and kind of I think deserves to be supported more now more than ever, you know? And yeah, it's just incredible. They're just the best. Yeah, they're just the best. It's I think the collective is this idea of collective is really alluring to me, and I think it's very a powerful thing. And I think we need more collectives, just kind of doing, supporting, promoting, all that kind of stuff.
Totally agree. I think we're in a time where we're getting away from individualism. And what I love about collective too is that they're really pushing formal boundaries.
Mhm.
Right. We do have to wrap it up soon. I'd love to hear you talk finally, and I'm going to give you the last word for sure. But as a Métis artist who makes work, about Indigenous communities, but also just about formal subjects like Carlo Molino, you have this wide range. How important is representation for you and its various facets?
It's super important. I think like it's interesting to me, and I'm gonna try to not be too long-winded about this, but like when I first started making films and I was kind of welcomed into this sort of culture, in my city, Winnipeg, the more avant-garde culture was fairly non-diverse. And but because I was that into that culture, I was allowed to kind of experience different forms of filmmaking, which kind of helped me finesse sort of my interests. But then, that those relationships were severed very quickly because those aren't my people, those aren't my beings. So it was not a sustainable place for me. And you kind of think back about the experiences, and it's just like it's kind of horrific, the lack of representation. And kind of I was at a point where I was like super angry and just decided to put that anger into kind of realizing who my peers were, and who I believe in, who I want to support, who I want to collaborate with. And it's easier to put that energy of like being mad into kind of building new things, building new relationships. And yeah, it's kind of once you're in a new space, you realize how abusive that old space was, and you just kind of you keep it there in order to move forward and explore new things. Like what we're exploring is nowhere near perfect, but I definitely feel like supportive, cared for. I feel safe where I'm making films, and that was something that I didn't realize I was feeling unsafe for many years. And
Mm.
so I think representation is important. You need to know who's out there. You need to know who your peers are. And it's at the forefront. I grew up rural Manitoba. There was no art class, so I came into art so delayed. And so I kind of understand how certain groups can move more ahead in the face of others who are probably just as deserving. So I kind of I really try to keep that in my mind. And yeah, try to put the love back out there, because I've been grateful to, and very fortunate to receive a lot of love for me, myself, my projects, what I do. So I just you have to spread it around. So yeah.
Well, thank you for allowing yourself to be chaotic in making this film, because you've made something really special, and I'm really happy that it's in the program this year. So thank you so much, Rhayne.
Thank you.